The Jets address a major need with a familiar face, and it's a good move. We'll discuss today. It's Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Thursday, March 14th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out and helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Well, the Jets address a major need on Wednesday by making a trade, and they acquire a player who's a familiar name to Jets fans. We're going to talk about the trade on today's show, and the player, if you did not follow the news yesterday, the player the Jets acquired is Morgan Moses. Moses played with the Jets back in 2021. He was a pretty savvy signing the Jets made. It was a late offseason signing. He was cut by Washington pretty late in that offseason. The Jets grabbed him, and he was supposed to be the third tackle. He was supposed to be kind of like the backup tackle, but then Mekhi Becton got injured the first game of the season, and Moses ended up starting the final 16 games at right tackle and playing pretty well. You know, you can't really say he saved the season because the Jets only won 4 games, but things were a lot better with Morgan Moses in there than they would have been otherwise. Now, the package involves a pick swap in the 4th round. So the Jets drop from 112 to 134. So essentially, the Jets send pick 112 to Baltimore. The Ravens send pick 134 with Moses to New York. The Jets also send a 6th round pick to the Baltimore Ravens. So as you can tell, that's not really a compensation package that's very expensive. It's a pretty cheap deal to get a quality starting right tackle. And Moses does not cost a whole lot of money. We know the Jets are very tight up against the salary cap. He's only going to cost about $5.5 million against the salary cap. So essentially, Jets got a quality right tackle and did not have to give up much, and he does not have a very high cap number. In fact, if you look, I looked at a couple of the charts. There are a couple NFL trade charts I look at, and back of the envelope math, the Jets gave up around the equivalent of like a 5th round pick for Moses. If you factor in the values of the 6th round pick they send over and the value of the pick swap in the 4th round, I find it very difficult to have an issue with this trade. I always look at these things from every angle, and I try and figure out, okay, what's the good, what's the bad here. This just looks like a really solid trade on paper for the New York Jets. I mean, the only things like I could say like are mild concerns are, one, Baltimore's a really good team, so why would they want to get rid of this guy? 2, Moses did miss 3 games with a shoulder injury in 2023. He's 34 years old. There's questions, maybe does Baltimore know something? Is it one of those situations you trade a player a year too soon? But I mean, those are very, very mild concerns relative to what you normally think about when you acquire a player. Normally there's like, okay, this is how things will go if it goes well. This is how it'll go if it goes poorly. This feels like a really savvy move by the Jets. On yesterday's show, I talked a bit about how Jets fans should not panic because the team was inactive the first couple of days of free agency. It's important to remember the offseason is a marathon, not a sprint. And as I've been saying over and over, and I'm not just this week, but through the years, a lot of the dumb money is spent the first couple of days of free agency. Sometimes it takes 3 days and frequently more for the move you want, for the move that's there at the price that's good for you to be made. Moses has been a solid player in the NFL for a long time. Now, again, I know he did miss 3 games last year. Those are the only 3 games he's missed in the last 9 years. So he's durable. If you watch the Jets the last couple of years, I think you appreciate the significance of a lineman who stays healthy, who's durable. Now, of course, the NFL is a league where freak injuries happen, especially on the offensive line. Physical position, bodies rolling around, it's tough to stay healthy. Injuries can happen to anybody. But Morgan Moses going for nine years and barely ever having an injury that cost him a game, that's significant because the Jets' offensive line's been decimated by injuries the last couple of years. And the Jets needed somebody who's durable. I mean, I remember if you're a longtime listener, you probably didn't even need to listen to the show to know how happy I was with this trade because I've talked extensively about how, with some degree of hindsight, now I'll say at the time, like, I thought the Jets should have kept Moses. And that there was a big part of me that felt like the Jets should have cashed in on George Fant, sold him off at like his highest point because Fant had a good 2021, but it kind of felt like an outlier. And there was a part of me at the time that felt like the Jets just should have traded Fant while his value was high and kept Moses, who's been a steady tackle for a long time in this league. Now, to be fair, it's not like I was pounding the table. It's not like I was coming on the show every day and saying that. It was more of a passing thought. But it's almost like the Jets undoing what was a mistake in retrospect. Kind of like last year with Thomas Morstead, who also resigned on Wednesday. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. But it was one of those moves that if you could go back and undo it, you would have undone letting Moses go to Baltimore because he got to Baltimore on a cheap deal. He's been a guy who's been solid through much of his career. He's still playing at a pretty high level. Is he a star? No. But, star linemen don't hit the trade market most of the time. And if they do, they're usually at the end of their careers. I've been preaching on this show the importance of the Jets should look to get younger. Jets should not be bringing in players in their 30s. But here's the caveat. If you're going to bring in a player in his 30s, make it somebody who's still playing at a high level and make it somebody who's shown an extreme degree of durability because those are the guys who you can buy into aging well. I as much as I've been preaching the idea that Jets need to get younger, especially on the offensive line, I can't complain about this one because this is a guy who's shown an ability to stay healthy. This is a guy who's still, you think can probably have another good year in him. Again, tough for me to find something to dislike about this trade. I mean, the only thing you can dislike about the trade, if you want to be negative, you just say the Jets never should have let him go 2 years ago. And that's fair, but you know what? What's gone is gone. The old saying, no crying over spilt milk. He left. There's nothing we can do about that. This is the type of move I've not seen the Jets make enough of through the years, where you're patient. You find a guy who fits a need for you, a guy who's a good player, and you don't have to pay a lot for him. You find the bargain. I'm happy with Joe Douglas. It feels good to be happy with Joe Douglas for something. Haven't had a chance to be happy with Joe Douglas in a long time. Long way to go this offseason, and the Jets still have an awful lot of needs to fill. But this feels like the Joe Douglas of the first couple of years where, maybe the results weren't spectacular, but the plan made sense. And the team was making say what you will. And look, I've certainly criticized Douglas a lot, and I think a lot of the criticism is justified. But the first couple of years, even if Joe Douglas wasn't doing an A+ job, there were things that made sense. And it felt like the team was moving in the right direction. And this offseason, with his job on the line, so far, now let's, this could all go down the drain today if the Jets go out and sign MVS and Bakhtiari and all the old Packers guys. But with his job on the line, Douglas, at least to this point, has avoided the temptation that a lot of GMs on the hot seat have, which is just torch the future and focus on the now and just try and save your job. Douglas actually feels like, at least through the first 3 days, that he's still trying to build this team in a sound, or getting back to trying to build this team in a sound way. And really, Jets have so many needs. Jets have so many holes to fill. It's going to take an awful lot for this team to get where it wants to be next year. But the only chance it has is through sound building, not through giving out a bunch of crazy contracts. So it's going to be a slower process than a lot of fans would like. But if the Jets are going to be as good as they want to be in 2024, you're going to have to see a lot more moves like this. But moves like this are going to take more time, so you're going to have to be a little patient. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about some of the implications the Moses trade has, because I think that there are things that this means about the way the offensive line will be configured. It also could have some implications for the Jets in the NFL draft. I'll tell you what they are as we continue on this Thursday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Game Time. You should not have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time's the fast and easy way to buy all the tickets for the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time has easy-to-find, tickets for every event. And they give you the view from your seat so that there are no surprises when you arrive. And all-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. I've used Game Time many times. I've used it for theater. I've used it for tennis. I've used it for football. It's so easy, and I've gotten amazing deals at the last minute. Just a great app. It's now my go-to app for buying tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON. It's one word with no space, locked on for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And as you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendar for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m., be the first to get local insight from Major League Baseball local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. And today on Locked On Jets, we're talking about the Jets trading for Morgan Moses. An old friend returns to the New York Jets. He was with the Jets back in 2021, played really solid football. And if you haven't been listening to the first segments, you know this pleases me quite a bit. I think that this was a good trade for the Jets. I think they got a good player, a guy who fills a critical need at a price that just can't beat it. Really good move. I mean, the only knocks you can have are that, age, but even then he's still playing at a pretty high level. So it's really tough for me to find an issue with this one. I mean, the only issue is he's not a star. He's not like an all-pro, and I guess because he's going to be 34, you'll probably only have him for 1 year. But again, price, just a good move. But there are other things I like about this. First of all, he's a veteran. And that's if you want to know why it's important that he's a veteran, and I'm always preaching about going for younger players, but think about the Jets offensive line coach. You probably know this is my new least favorite guy, Keith Carter, the Jets offensive line coach. I think he's awful. And the reason I think he's awful is because everybody who's played for it, so many players who've been with him have said he's awful. They just don't like him. So I worry about Keith Carter's ability to develop a young offensive lineman. And it's almost like if the Jets draft an offensive lineman who's not a plug-and-play guy, if they draft an offensive lineman this year who's not Joe Alt, a guy who needs some refinement, a guy who needs some development, it's almost like I'm looking to 2025 when Keith Carter's probably not going to be here. So a veteran like Moses, a guy who's been around the NFL for a decade, he's Keith Carter proof. Keith Carter, the offensive line coach is irrelevant for a guy who's been in the NFL for 10 years because he already knows how to play. So I love that. I'll tell you another thing I love about this is that Moses is probably going to play right tackle. And that means we're likely looking at Elijah Vera Tucker playing guard. And there's been some degree of uncertainty about that because AVT, of course, was brought to the Jets to play guard, but has been kind of pressed to play tackle the last couple of years in a pinch when the Jets have suffered injuries. And the Jets this offseason have given you a couple weird things about AVT because first they said we think the reason he's getting injured is we constantly move him around and the technique's changing. And then they say, well, we're not sure where we're going to play him. Now, I know the response to that, people are going to say, well, they're just picking one spot. They're not sure where it's going to be, but they're going to stop moving him around. Yeah, but, if you're saying the reason he's getting injured is the techniques are changing when he's moving around, think about where he's getting injured. He keeps getting injured at tackle. So if you believe that the reason he's getting injured is that he's moving around, is it just that he's moving around, or is it the place he's landing at is forcing him to do things that maybe are causing injuries? And the Jets have kind of left the door open for AVT to play tackle. I don't think that's great. That's a good thing for AVT. I think if you look at Elijah Vera Tucker the last couple of years, when he's played tackle, he's been fine based on when you grade him on a curve. When you say this is a guy who's really a guard, but in an emergency we've had to play him tackle. Yeah, he's looked pretty good. No question about it. That's different from saying I believe AVT is going to hold up really well there over the course of 17 games. It's also different from saying this is the best thing for AVT. Because I just have this vision of AVT plays tackle that we're going to get to the end of the next season and everyone's going to say, why did we play him at tackle? We've just, he should be a guard. This is like the stuff the Jets always do. With Moses in the mix, it becomes far less likely that AVT is going to play tackle. And with Moses at right tackle, I mean, now the Jets need a left tackle. There's no question. I don't think AVT is playing left tackle. And I think that it's more likely AVT is playing guard, and I think that's where he belongs. I think I've kind of settled on this. I've thought about this more and more. I've kind of gone back and reviewed some of the film over the last couple of years during over the course of the offseason. I've settled that AVT should be playing guard, and Moses being around makes that more likely. Heading into the offseason, it felt like the guard market was better than the tackle market. It felt more likely that the Jets were going to be able to get a guard than they were going to be able to get a tackle. Or two tackles because they had to replace both tackles. They still need to get one more tackle, but this was a really savvy move, and this again shows you that you don't always know who's going to be available, because Morgan Moses was not a name on anybody's radar at the start of the offseason, but the Jets were able to go grab him. Now, I think that this also might, and I've been thinking the Jets were going to draft Fuaga from Oregon State. I've been feeling like he was the most likely pick. That might make this less likely. Now, Morgan Moses is going to be 34, so it's not like he's going to have a lot of staying power. But if we're looking for a plug-and-play tackle or a plug-and-play guy at 10, I think it becomes more difficult to figure out where Fuaga fits, because there's thoughts, and he's the tackle from Oregon State, and some people think he could play guard, but he's not going to play right tackle with Morgan Moses around. He's probably not going to play guard with AVT, and after the Jets just signed John Simpson. I mean, unless you're planning on playing Fuaga or Morgan Moses at left tackle, or putting Fuaga at guard and kicking AVT out to left tackle, I don't think either of those are real options. I don't see where he fits now, unless you're going to draft him and just sit him for a year. But I don't know if the Jets are necessarily going to do that with the 10th overall pick. So that could be another implication from this. It could potentially change the Jets draft strategy, and that's fine. And look, the Jets still need to find a left tackle, and that's still a pretty gaping hole, and it's not going to be an easy one to fill. And look, if we're being honest, this is an offensive line now with a lot of question marks. Moses, I think, is pretty solid. AVT, the question is, can he stay healthy? Joe Tippmann, can he grow in year 2? Pretty good rookie season, but as we always say, good for a rookie is different from we're ready to roll going forward. John Simpson, can he grow? Left tackle, what the heck are the Jets doing? We still need to see that. And I'm going to reiterate what I've been saying. Don't panic yet. Long off season to go. You can't go overboard. It's the reason I've been saying it. You can't go overboard with the Jets not making a lot of moves the first couple of hours. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But you look at that offensive line. There's still a huge hole at the most important spot at left tackle. There are huge question marks. But you at least are beginning to see like a path where this offensive line can be pretty good if things go right. It's not like one of those things where you need where it's like doesn't feel realistic like last year, where it's like we need both Dwayne Brown and Mekhi Becton to play really well for 17 games, where it was like you knew it was never going to happen. There's at least like a pathway. You're starting to see a little light at the end of the tunnel saying, all right, there's a realistic scenario where this thing could work out okay on the offensive line. But believe it or not, it's not all about the offensive line. It's a lot about the offensive line, but there's more to building a team than that. As we continue on this Thursday edition of Locked On Jets, we're going to talk about another move the Jets made. They brought back their punter, and they also lost a player. And we'll go into all that as we continue this Thursday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer from another retirement account with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Thursday. We've been talking about the Jets trading for Morgan Moses, filling a critical need at the tackle position with a quality player, but there were some other developments for the New York Jets on Wednesday. Most notably, the team has re-signed punter Thomas Morstead. It was an expected move, a 2-year contract worth around $5 million. Much like the Moses move, I think it's difficult to argue with it. Morstead, really solid punter for the New York Jets. In fact, Moses and Morstead are kind of similar players in that the Jets let them go at some point, either during or after the 2021 season, and it was a mistake. And the Jets have rectified that mistake since by bringing them back. Morstead became the Jets punter when Braden Mann suffered an injury week 1 in the opener against the Carolina Panthers in 2021. Came in and did a really solid job. In fact, it was better than Braden Mann. And then Mann recovered. Jets brought Mann back and cut Morstead. And it was a move. Even at the time, I remember thinking maybe the Jets should just keep Morstead. And Mann went on to be very inconsistent for the Jets. You know, had some good moments, but had some really bad moments. And last year, the Jets fixed that by bringing back Morstead. Did a really solid job. And of course, I'm a little biased because Morstead's been a good friend to the podcast. Great guy. But I think objectively, if you're looking at what the Jets got from the punter last year, and look, with the Jets, the way the Jets offense was last year, the punter was actually pretty important. The Jets, we hope Morstead gets a little bit more rest this year. We hope the offense does a little bit better, and Morgan Moses should help with that. But Morstead back, 2-year contract, so we don't have to do this again next year, $5 million. And it was like there was some sort of salary cap quirk that prevented the Jets from re-signing him before the official start of free agency. So this is no surprise. All of the reports indicated that this was likely to happen. It's just the Jets and Morstead could not officially, agree to terms, or could not officially sign an extension or a new contract until the new league year began, which was yesterday. So, we don't have to worry about punters. The Jets, with Greg Zuerlein and Thomas Morstead, got to be feeling pretty good about their kicking game. Special teams was something that gave the Jets an advantage last season. And, it doesn't make a difference when your offense is as bad as the Jets was. But, if you're actually a good team, special teams gives you a little bit of an edge. This is a league where around half the games are decided by one score or less. And, sometimes as big special teams play, whether it's making a long field goal, whether it's a punt that flips field position. Sometimes those plays, you don't always think about them, but they make a big difference. The Jets also lost safety Jordan Whitehead. Whitehead goes back to his original team. This is the team the Jets got him from 2 years ago, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a 2-year deal worth $9 million, so about $4.5 million for Whitehead, which, in all honesty, for Whitehead's not an awful value for Tampa Bay. But yeah, you can't be upset about losing Whitehead. The guy was just so inconsistent. I mean, he's interesting, in that there are moments where you see plays where he looks like he's worth every dollar, and then there are moments where you see bad. Just played really poorly. Whitehead does some things decently. He plays the run okay in the box, and he's pretty solid if you stick him in the deep middle part of the field. The problem is, like, if he's trying to play the run, he play the run in the box fine, but if you play the run from the deep middle, he'll take bad angles. Also, you hate it when he gets one-on-one in space. If you get him one-on-one in space, there's a decent chance you're going to miss a tackle. Even though he's at a reasonable price, with the Jets so resource poor this offseason, I think even $4.5 million for a player like Whitehead, it's not a great deal. I think I said it the other day. I actually think Chuck Clark might be a better player than Jordan Whitehead. And the Jets, we don't have the details yet, but you'd have to assume Chuck Clark, coming off a serious injury, probably going to be cheaper than that $4.5 million. And, this is an offseason where the safety market's not expected to be there. There's some guys who have signed, but there's always a good safety available. I say it over and over. You don't really have to worry about safety in this league if you know what you're doing, because you'll get to June, you'll get to May, June, and there's going to be some guy who's available. You're like, well, how does this guy? He's a good player. How's he still available? It's just not a position the league values very highly, and savvy teams can take advantage of that by finding players who don't cost a whole lot, but who can fill your needs perfectly. And right now, I got to be honest with you, I feel pretty solid about where the Jets are at safety. Tony Adams did not have a stellar first season as a starter, but one of the things I always look at is trajectory. Tony Adams went from undrafted free agent signing to second-year guy who had a starting role, and may not have been a spectacular player, but at least he wasn't a disaster either. So there's still a lot of runway for Tony Adams to potentially improve into a good player. And then at Clark, you just have a guy who's going to man the position in a very solid way. And there's still time to go out and get a third safety. And we know the Jets love those big nickel looks where they essentially have a safety playing a linebacker role, or kind of like half linebacker, half slot corner. So you have a safety who's better than the slot corner against the run, but better than the linebacker against the pass. The Jets do that a lot. Ashton Davis is still available. He kind of filled that role in last year. You had, Jamie and Sherwood. And that's the thing, is like there's not a huge difference between a box safety and linebacker. So it's like, a lot of the times the Jets essentially have safeties play a linebacker role. And there's probably going to be a good one available, even though they lost. And I know they lost Whitehead, but there's probably still going to be a pretty good safety available later on if the Jets want to add to their depth and, throw out some 3 safety looks next season. So yeah, I think it's tough to be upset about losing Whitehead. I don't think it's an awful signing for Tampa Bay, but I was ready to move on. He had that great 3 interception opener against the Buffalo Bills, but then really kind of struggled after that point. A very inconsistent player, and it was not a disaster signing for the Jets, but I don't think you could say that that ended up being a great signing for the Jets. I think he just ended up being kind of okay. He was fine while he was here, but it's also fine to lose him. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy this show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, please give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out and helps other Jets fans find the podcast. I hope you enjoy your Thursday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to close out the week.